Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. Most Israelis just want to live quiet, peaceful lives. But in these turbulent end times, all roads lead to Israel, God's prophetic timepiece. If you want to understand the prophetic importance of something, look at it in relation to Israel. North Korea's weapons of mass destruction place South Korea, Japan, and to some degree, the whole world in danger. That's our immediate concern. But its prophetic significance can be seen in the way it affects Israel. First, it reminds us that North Korea might one day be one of the mysterious kings of the East of Revelation 16:12, who will march against Israel in the time leading up to Armageddon. But North Korea also has a more immediate connection to Israel, Iran. The Korean communists have long been Iran's primary supplier of weapons technology. And Iran has made the complete destruction of Israel its stated goal. Most Iranian missiles are based on North Korean models. With China pressuring the rogue nation to stop its WMD programs, Iran becomes more important to Kim Jong-un's government. China provides 90% of North Korea's fuel. If China stops the flow of oil, what could the North do? They already have a hard time keeping the lights on. They would have to turn more heavily toward Iran, one of the world's leading oil producers. North Korea needs Iran's fuel trade. Iran needs North Korea's nuclear and missile technology. It's a marriage made in hell. For years, the U.S. State Department has designated Iran the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. There are many reasons for this designation, but the biggest is their relationship to the terror group Hezbollah. It's not even a nation, but according to the Weekly Standard, Hezbollah has an offensive arsenal bigger than that of all Western Europe. That includes 130,000 operational ballistic missiles. And these aren't just homemade, do-it-yourself models. They are highly sophisticated and enormously powerful. How could a terrorist group gain such an arsenal? For the most part, they got it from their Shia Muslim allies in Iran. Iran based their designs on technology purchased from North Korea. So as North Korea develops even better missiles, Iran will get them too. And as Iran missiles grow more powerful and sophisticated, you can count on Hezbollah also getting better missiles. Almost every one of those 130,000 missiles points south toward Israel. The elite of the elite, the Iranian military, is a special forces group called Quds Force. They answer directly to Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. More than any other group in Iran, they work directly with Hezbollah and other terrorist groups. Al-Quds is the most common Arabic name for Jerusalem. The point is obvious when you name your country's most elite military unit the Jerusalem Force. You tell the world that you intend to one day take Jerusalem in battle. Ezekiel 38 says that in the future, Iran will attempt just that. They will join with Russia to lead a massive invasion of Israel. When Russian aircraft buzz U.S. aircraft in Alaska, or fly the coast of California just outside of U.S. airspace, Americans become concerned about their security. That's the immediate significance of their action. But look at the bigger picture, and Israel again comes into play. Continuing displays of Russian belligerence isolates it from other nations. Their friends are dwindling dramatically, increasing the importance of their few alliances. The same thing is happening with Iran and with Turkey. These nations fought one another for millennia, but their alliance is growing every day, just as the Bible predicted. Israel is God's timepiece. Make no mistake, the countdown has begun. President Trump hopes to meet with Pope Francis when he attends the G7 summit in late May.
And I look very much forward to meeting the Pope.
Maureen Fiedler, writing for the National Catholic Reporter, addressed the pontiff directly. Francis, if you're reading NCR these days, this is worth a try. Nobody else seems to be able to educate Trump on the basics of our world and an ethical path forward. Maybe you can. Or maybe the president could say something instructive to a pope who seems intent on building a one-world government that is utterly totalitarian in nature. Or they might just commiserate with one another on the issue of palace intrigue. A few weeks ago, The Guardian ran a story with the headline, "Civil War in the Vatican as Conservatives Battle Francis for the Soul of Catholicism." Massimo Fagioli is described as a leading theologian and Vatican watcher. He said that to oppose the Pope is to be against changing the style and position of the Church from a Western one to a global religion. By Western, he means Christian. The Guardian wrote, "The most vocal opposition to the Pope has developed over his desire for debate about marriage and divorce, gay people and the family. The Catholic Church needs reform, but not to become more politically correct or to keep up with the times. Reformation should be about conforming to God and His revealed Word. All churches would do well to follow Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's the real Reformation. In 2016, Francis praised Martin Luther for restoring the centrality of Scripture. What a wonderful thing it would be if he would really take that to heart. The Pope recently said that it's better to be an atheist than a hypocritical Catholic. That's a devastating comment, because every honest person faces in himself some level of hypocrisy. The Bible is clear. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But until he believes, the atheist cannot turn to Christ for forgiveness and redemption. Jesus said, "He who does not believe has been judged already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God." The Pope's statement reflected the era of believing you can earn salvation by good works. Will the Catholic Church, in the end, make God's great salvation message nothing more than a regurgitation of the social gospel? Francis seems intent on remaking the church he leads into a liberal activist organization. Does this Pope want to make social justice warriors out of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics? China is cracking down hard on churches that are not sanctioned by that government. But The Pope seems to be taking the side of the atheist oppressors of China's most faithful Catholics. Francis seems to get on well with Chinese government leaders, but at the expense of the most faithful members of his own church. The highest-ranking prelate in China, Cardinal Joseph Zen, said recently, "We are very much worried because it seems that the Vatican is going to make a very bad agreement with China." He called Francis really naive. He said, "The people around this Pope are not good at all. They have very wrong ideas, and I'm afraid that they may sell out our underground church." Because the word genocide was invented in 1944, you might think it was coined to describe the Jewish Holocaust at the hands of the Nazis, but it wasn't. In 1944, knowledge of the Holocaust was still mostly hidden from the world, and the worst part of it was yet to come. Instead, the word was conceived by a Jewish lawyer named Raphael Lemkin. He used it to describe the annihilation of Armenians at the hands of the Turks during the years 1915 to 1923. 100 years ago, the Armenian Holocaust was in full swing. Last week, the New York Times wrote, in 1915, Ottoman Turks, fearful that the restive Christian Armenian population would side against them in the war, began massacring Armenians and forced marching them to their deaths. The United Nations, the Roman Catholic Church, the European Parliament, historians and scholars have roundly recognized the atrocities as a genocide, the 20th century's first. The systematic extermination of the Armenian people began during World War I and near the end of the Ottoman Empire. It continued after the formation of the new nation of Turkey. 1.5 million Armenians were murdered. Even though it's well documented, the nation of Turkey still denied that it ever happened. A study by the University of Minnesota found that 2.1 million Armenians lived in the Ottoman Empire in 1914. By 1922, that number had gone down to 388,000. Time magazine said, evidence shows that Adolf Hitler spoke of how what happened in Turkey influenced his plans to wipe out the Jewish population. Today, the Armenian genocide is in the news again because of a controversial new film called The Promise. It's a kind of movie critics usually love. Glenn Kinney of RogerEbert.com wrote, "The Promise is drenched in production value and replete with ravishing shots of sunrises and sunsets. But it's in the scenes of fleeing, of battle, and of horrendous loss that the film is at its most effective." Sadly, Kinney's positive review was in the minority. Critics gave various reasons for panning the movie, but it can't help wondering if the story of Islamic Turks murdering 1.5 million Christians in cold blood was just too politically incorrect to recommend. The New York Times reported, after the movie's premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival in September, it racked up 55,000 lowly one-star votes on the Internet Movie Database, which is quite something considering only a few thousand people had actually seen it at the 3 public screenings. That means the opposition to the movie's story is organized. In 1997, the California Assembly debated a bill to set aside a California Day of Remembrance for the Armenian genocide of 1915 through 1923. An assemblywoman made a speech opposing the bill. She claimed that the Ottomans' systematic extermination of Armenians did not rise to the level of genocide. That's when the bill's sponsors, Assemblyman Howard Kalugyan, who is a good friend of this program and co-founder of the Tea Party Express, rose to defend his bill. He reminded the Assembly that the word genocide had been created to describe the Armenian disaster. Then he spoke about an eyewitness to the disaster, a little girl named Christine, his own grandmother.
Let me close by telling you what happened to my grandmother, who told me the story many times. She saw her brothers and sisters and parents murdered before her. She was able to escape. A family in the neighborhood took her into their household and told her, "You will no longer be called Christine, because that is a Christian name and it will give you away. You will be called this other name." And she never revealed that other name to us. But it was a Turkish name. Think of the meaning of your name. Think of the meaning to you that your name has. To be taken away from your family, to see your family murdered, and to have your very identity removed from you. It was a very traumatic experience for that 10-year-old. Then she was told she was no longer a Christian, but she must be a Muslim. She is no longer an Armenian, but she is now a Turk. That she cannot speak Armenian, she must speak Turkish. And every night she would cry herself asleep, and she would remind herself, and she would pray to her God, and she would say, "My name is not this other name, my name is Christine. I am not Turkish, I am Armenian. I am not Muslim, I am Christian. I do speak Armenian, and I will remember my language."
The horrors faced by the Christians of Armenia 100 years ago have not gone away. They have simply surfaced in other places. The number of Christians persecuted for their faith around the world is at the highest level in history. It was bad before the rise of ISIS, but has grown horribly worse since then. Today, the anguish suffered by Christians in the promise seemed far away and long ago. It seems unthinkable that it could still be going. But it is. It seems beyond imagination that similar things could happen here in America the Beautiful, but they could. In fact, if the Lord delays his coming long enough, I'm convinced such things will happen here. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12 speaks of persecution when it says, "Beloved, do not be surprised by the fiery ordeal among you." I'm not saying to be afraid. I'm saying to remember the prisoners as though in prison with them. I am also encouraging you to strengthen or renew your own commitment to Christ to victoriously face the hard times that lay ahead.
Hal Lindsey's look back at tumultuous, remarkable 2016 in the light of Bible prophecy is now available on DVD. The Prophetic Year in Review 2016 DVD can be yours for only $14.95 plus shipping and handling. To order your DVD of Hal Lindsey's Prophetic Year in Review 2016, call toll-free 1-888-RAPTURE. You can also visit hallindsey.com or write to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. Order your DVD of Hal Lindsey's Prophetic Year in Review 2016 today.
Back in the 1980s, I wrote a book that was also called The Promise. It goes into some depth on the idea that fulfilled prophecy in the life of Jesus confirms his identity as Messiah. Prophecy is not unique to the Bible. Hundreds of psychics and religious seers have made predictions of the future. Some of them even came true. But the Bible remains unique because it has been 100% accurate in every prophecy fulfilled to date. I realize that's an enormous statement to make. On this program, I can't go through them all, but I would like to talk about a few of those that relate to the Messiah. This promised one of God was spoken of by at least 20 of the Old Testament writers. They lived at different times in history and in greatly varying circumstances. The different names they called him spoke of his message and ministry. Moses called him Shiloh, the rightful heir of God's throne. In 1 Chronicles chapter 17, verses 11 through 15, the Messiah is called the Son of David. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7 says, "There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore." Jeremiah referred to him as the righteous branch of David and the Lord our righteousness. King David in Psalm 2:2 called him Jehovah's anointed one. Through Isaiah, God the Father called him my righteous servant. There were many other names for God's anointed one who was to come. Through the centuries, stroke by stroke, a portrait of this great deliverer emerged. Minute details of his ancestry, forerunner, birth date, birthplace, infancy, manhood, teaching, character, career, preaching, reception, rejection, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension were all pre-written in the Jewish prophets. It became clear that this Messiah would not only appear for the blessing of Israel, but for the whole world. In Isaiah 49:6, God the Father speaks to God the Son and says, "I will also make you a light of the nations, so that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth." The first mention of the appearance of this promised one is found right after the first mention of sin in the Bible. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, God told Adam and Eve that there would be a future seed of a woman who would bruise the head of Satan. Jewish commentators and later on Christian ones saw this as a prediction of this coming deliverer. He would undo the damage Satan caused to mankind's relationship with God. Nothing more was written about the promised seed until around the year 2000 BC, when God called a man named Abram, later renamed Abraham, to leave his home in Ur of the Chaldees and to go to the far-off land which God promised to give him. God made an agreement or covenant with Abraham that if he would go to this unknown land that he had chosen for him, great blessings would come to him personally and his descendants. Their numbers would be as vast as the sands of the sea, and through this seed of Abraham, the whole world would eventually be blessed. The word seed is a collective noun and refers to all of the future children of Abraham. But ancient Jewish and Christian writers also saw this as a further reference to the promised seed of Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, who came to be known among the descendants of Abraham as the Anointed One, meaning Messiah. Jesus Christ is the focal point of history. The prophecies about him, his birth, life, death, resurrection, and soon return are the hope of humanity. But more important, they can be your hope too. All you must do is confess to God that you are a sinner and want to be clean. Believe that Jesus is indeed the Son of God and that He died to pay the price for your sins. Then accept the free gift of pardon that He purchased with His death. Now believe that God has accepted Christ's sacrifice for you and will do all He has promised in His Word. If you did it sincerely, then you have just changed your eternal destiny, and the hope of all mankind is your eternal hope too. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.